The Fog is the classic John Carpenter horror movie from 1980 starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Adrienne Barbeau, and a mustacheless Tom Atkins. Now, I know it's distracting, but you just have to try to look past it. It's 5 minutes until midnight of the centennial for Antonio Bay in Northern California, and old Mr. Machin is telling ghost story to the children by a campfire. And he's telling them about a clipper ship that crashed against the rocks 100 years ago today, causing all of its crew to drown.
When the fog returns to Antonio Bay, the men at the bottom of the sea rise up and search for the campfire that led them to their dark and icy death.
And I feel like this story was really wasted on these kids. Like, this dude probably waited decades to be able to tell this story tonight, only to get these dumb faces staring back at him. Like, that's it. He has nothing else to live for. He was banking everything on this story. Like, not even a gasp. The priest in Antonio Bay is Father Malone, and he and his assistant Bennett are closing up the church for the night. And now, if you were upset about no mustache for Tom Atkins, well, don't worry. Hal Holbrook and John Carpenter will make up for it. These two always knew the mustache assignment. Father Malone discovers his grandfather's diary hidden in the wall of the church, and the diary reveals that 100 years ago, the 6 founders of Antonio Bay, including Father Malone's grandfather, deliberately wrecked a ship named the Elizabeth Dane so that its leprosy-afflicted Captain Blake wouldn't set up a leper colony nearby. The founders then stole the gold from the Elizabeth Dane and used it to establish Antonio Bay. And now, as some of you know, my Uncle Greg worked on a lot of prominent movies in the 80s and 90s, and he just so happened to be the prop master for The Fog. And one day he accidentally took a nap in Tom Atkins' trailer, and Tom Atkins, of course, tore my Uncle Greg a new asshole in front of John Carpenter, who laughed at Greg. He just laughed. John Carpenter clearly didn't know about my Uncle Greg's undiagnosed narcolepsy, and John Carpenter then had the nerve to ask Uncle Greg to write an entire 100-page journal, even though no one was going to be able to see the whole thing. But then, of course, Hal Holbrook turned to the one joke page that Uncle Greg added, which, just has Uncle Greg jokes in it. Like, oh, wasting my college education to work writing dumb shit in this movie's props, and then also, it's time to bring in the nude girls with big tattoos and shaved. If you don't get the joke, then you are the joke, all right? Uncle Greg was way ahead of his time, and he should not have been fired. And the fact that this journal is word for word the Unabomber's manifesto is complete coincidence. My Uncle Greg was not the Unabomber. That was Ted Kaczynski. My uncle was Greg Kaczynski. 2 completely different people. And we then meet our hero, Nick Castle, and I stated in my Halloween 3 video that Tom Atkins was the greatest final dad in the horror movie, but now in The Fog, he doesn't have a mustache and doesn't have children, so is he the greatest final uncle? Like Uncle Nick is your dad's younger brother, and he definitely owns several crossbows. I imagine Uncle Nick 100% showed you Faces of Death when you were 9, like it was no big deal, and without a doubt, Uncle Nick has a giant scar on his head from flipping a go-kart while drunk. And like you'd overhear something at school, and so when you needed to figure out what it meant, you went and asked Uncle Nick, "What's a cream pie?" And Uncle Nick would just smile and say, "You should ask your mother, she loves them." And years later, you would look back on it and be like, wait, did Uncle Nick have sex with my mom? Uncle Nick would always show up to your birthday party with a new 20-year-old girlfriend, and 70% of the time, the girlfriend's name was Brandy. And Uncle Nick would then get blackout drunk and pass out in the pool, and you'd have to apologize to all your friends. And if you went to your Uncle Nick's house, you would almost always stumble upon a stash of porn, and there would be several VHS tapes with the name Melissa on them, which is your mother's name. And like, no, seriously, did Uncle Nick have sex with my mom? And so because it's the 80s and it's Tom Atkins, Nick is naturally drinking and driving and picking up hitchhikers. The hitchhiker is named Elizabeth, and she's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And Nick immediately takes her to his place and has sex with her. I mean, his character is played by Tom Atkins. Audiences wouldn't believe that he didn't plow this lady. And now a one-night stand is one thing, but a one-night stand with a hitchhiker? That's on a whole nother level. She doesn't have a home, Nick. You'll never be able to get rid of her. Antonio Bay's hottest radio station is KAB, hosted by Stevie Wayne. And KAB plays nothing but smooth jazz, which is one of the scariest things about this movie.
I'm high tonight in the KAB Lighthouse on Spivey Point. And there's a celebration planned for tonight. So if you're so excited about it, you can't sleep, well, stay up with me, and I'll figure out some way to keep you occupied.
And Stevie has just about one of the worst DJ voices I've ever heard. It's almost as bad as Delilah. Just something about it fills me with anxiety and rage. I don't like it. It's unnaturally sultry.
The weatherman's been trying to spoil it for us. He says we may be in for some rain tonight. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like clear skies. I think the weatherman's been working too hard.
If I was a local weatherman, I'd be like, what the hell, Stevie? I'm working with 1980s weather technology. I don't make the weather. And also, people don't really bash weathermen like they used to in the 80s and 90s. Like, if I'm the weatherman and I'm settling into bed with my nightshirt and weird nightcap, sipping on a glass of warm milk and listening to smooth jazz, then hearing Stevie make fun of me would just ruin my whole day.
It's 12:43, and I've got 4 in a row for you right here on KAB.
She could literally play the same song 4 times in a row and no one would ever be able to tell. But we soon learned that Stevie's disdain for weathermen is justified because the local weatherman, Dan, is an annoying creep who calls her every day. And on this night, he tells her about a boat called the Seagrass that's 15 miles out and is about to be blanketed by fog.
Stevie Wayne here, beaming a signal across the sea. To the men of the Seagrass, 15 miles out tonight. A warm hello, and keep a watch out for that fog bank heading in from the east.
If I was getting drunk on a boat in the middle of the night and the radio DJ started speaking directly to me, I'd be freaking the hell out. But then I'd probably be mad also because why is this DJ warning me about something that I'm experienced to handle? Like, I'm sure these fishermen have sailed in fog before. It'd be like if my local DJ was all, hey there all you cool cats in Radio Land, this is Rad Chad with the Midnight Drive saying, hey distracted nerd, you have way too many browser tabs open and it's really slowing down your computer. I'd be like, oh hell no, you mind your own business, Rad Chad. But the fog does roll in and the ghost crew from the Elizabeth Dane murders the 3 crewmen. The next day, Stevie's son Andy finds a board with the name Dane on it, and he races home to show his mother.
First it was a gold coin, and then it turned into this neat piece of wood.
And he's kind of an idiot. He's happy that the gold turned into a piece of wood. Meanwhile, Nick goes to the dock because he's worried about his friends on the Seagrass because they never came back last night.
I'm going to talk Ashcroft into taking out his boat and looking for the Seagrass.
Can I come along?
What'd I tell you, Nick? You're basically married to her at this point. They find the Seagrass, but no one is on board, and so they do some investigating like only Tom Atkins can.
You fish.
The only thing I know about fishing is you use a lot of worms.
Salt water.
I'm really glad he didn't drink right from the can of beer that he found on the murder boat because that would have been weird. Back at the radio station, the Dane sign changes to read 6 must die, and then it catches on fire and Stevie calls Andy to get more information about where he found it.
Andy, where did you get that piece of driftwood?
First it was a gold coin, and then it turned into the wood.
And also, Andy, you should be old enough to know that that is weird and unnatural. Just how you look weird and unnaturally old. You look like a youth pastor heading out to the store on a Saturday. You're like a young Al Borland. You know, I've said that Tom Atkins is the most dad-looking person ever, but old Andy over here might be given a run for his money. And oh my god, Castle and Andy are wearing the exact same shirt. Oh, now is Castle wearing a large child shirt, or is it the more likely scenario that Andy had his tailor bring his adult shirt in a little? And if you've ever seen my Best of the Best video, then you know how much I love it when a child looks like a tiny adult. Just hilarious.
I've lined up some tunes to help you celebrate the 100th birthday of Antonio Bay. So let's get down to business.
Man, this celebration tonight is gonna be lit. This is hype music of the highest caliber. And Jamie Lee Curtis's real-life mother, Janet Leigh, plays Mrs. Williams, who's busy planning the 100th anniversary celebration. She visits Father Malone at the church, and we get one of the weirdest jump scares of all time.
Father Malone? Jesus.
I'm sorry.
So, it's John Carpenter, so he gets a pass, but any other director, and they'd get the infamous distracted nerd dressing down. So the weatherman, or Weather Dan, if you will, is working the late shift, and like all weather sex pests, he calls Stevie to try to flirt, and he talks about the sexiest thing weathermen know, fog banks.
Heading inland. Should be here at the weather station in 5-10 minutes. Hey, you sound different tonight. Kind of intense.
I just feel like talking, that's all.
Oh, wait a minute. I thought you told me you didn't like to talk on the telephone.
If you know she doesn't like to talk on the phone, then why the hell do you call her every day, Dan? Just then someone pounds on the door of the weather station.
Someone's at the front door, sweetheart, playing a stupid joke. And whoever it is, they ain't gonna like finding me home.
Such a badass. But you already know his fate, because his name is Dan. And as I've proven, irrefutably, time and time again, no character named Dan has ever, nor will ever, survive a horror movie. Especially a Dan wearing a cable knit sweater.
Dan, stay away from the door!
Well, I'm sorry, Dan can't hear you, because he's gone insane with rage. Toot toot, all aboard the pain train, mother. The fog then causes the power to go out all over town.
Andy! Andy, get out of the house! Mrs. Cobra's get him out of the house! Please, run!
I would hate it if my local radio DJ was using the radio as her own personal messaging system. I know you're broadcasting out of a lighthouse like some bohemian, but let's try to keep it professional. It'd be like, hey, this is Rad Chad with your Drive at 5, and I've got a special message for my live-in lady, Crystal. Baby, you left the milk out all night, and now it's super chunky, so be sure to pick some up on your way home today. And now we've got a 30-minute rock block to make your drive home rockin'. Keep it right here with your boy Rad Chad on WKUM, The Come.
One is a beauty and one is a beast. They're gonna come together and have a feast.
Andy and his babysitter are securing the house from the fog, and Stevie tries in vain to warn her son on the radio. And Nick and Elizabeth show up and rescue Andy, and Stevie advises everyone to go to the town's church, and inside the group finds a gold cross in the wall cavity made from the rest of the stolen gold, and Malone, knowing that the crew have returned to take 6 lives to make up for the 6 original conspirators, offers the gold and himself to spare the others. Blake takes the cross, and him and his crew and the fog all disappear.
Something came out of the fog and tried to destroy us. In one moment, it vanished. But if this has been anything but a nightmare, and if we don't wake up to find ourselves safe in our beds, it could come again. To the ships at sea who can hear my voice, look across the water into the darkness. Look for the fog.